Wake the frick up, Street Samurai. We got a book to review. Hello and welcome to the review of Cyberpunk RED, the sequel to the TTRPG known as Cyberpunk 2020, which is in itself a sequel of another game just called Cyberpunk 2013, I believe. Both released far before those times, so they imagined a futuristic future with cybernetics that we obviously didn't get anywhere near to those times. This Cyberpunk RED RPG is actually set in the same universe as Cyberpunk 2077 and the critically acclaimed Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime. I personally have never played a full game of Cyberpunk RED, but I've played plenty of its predecessor, Cyberpunk 2020, and I enjoyed that a lot. And just from perusing this when it came out, which was during the pandemic, basically, I thought it looked pretty good. But anyway, let's stop dilly-dallying and get into the review. The first section is called Never Fade Away. This is essentially just a short story that actually they use as a learning tool later on. It is a story that basically is set in universe, and as it can show you right there on the image I use, it is featured in the year of 2013 in the game setting. Actually has at least two recognizable characters from Cyberpunk 2077. The character of Johnny Silverhand, aka Keanu Reeves' character, and the character of Rogue. This section primarily serves to give a glimpse into the world of Cyberpunk, and that is its major function as the beginning part of the book. This next section that follows is known as View from the Edge, Intro to Cyberpunk. This gives you a small overview of the past and present universe of Cyberpunk RED. Cyberpunk RED is not actually set in Cyberpunk 2077, but rather but rather 2045. But there will actually be, in the near future, its release date has not been announced, but in the near future, they will have a Cyberpunk 2077 source book so that you can play in the setting of 2077. I personally theorize that it's waiting until basically all the Cyberpunk 2077 DLC is out, because that book might contain spoilers for both those and the ordinary game, so they're waiting a little bit extra, just make sure that they don't spoil. This also goes over a very small, shallow, here's what TTRPGs are, and kind of what you might need to roll to play the game, which for the most part in this, it's D10s, which are 10-sided dice, and D6s, which are 6-sided. Almost everyone has seen at least the D6, because that is the standard die that you see basically everywhere, including in Monopoly and Sorry, and games like Sorry, like the card. But yeah, it's very commonly just seen around. Then this chapter basically wraps up with a street slang section or terminology section for stuff in years like the Ripper Duck, which is an illegal cyberware surgeon. Another example is flatline, which is to kill someone, aka I flatlined him. Or get me to the Ripper Duck, my cybernetics are going haywire. Chromed is another one, it basically means you got a bunch of cyberware on. But basically, yeah, that's where that section ends. And we move on to the next one. Soul and the New Machine, Who Will You Be? This section is basically contains the basic classes, if you use Dungeons & Dragons terms, and there are actually 10 of them, and it gives you small little character creation info. The first of the classes in this, or roles as they're truly referred to in-game, is the Rocker Boy, or as I basically refer to them as, just the Rocker. Because Rocker Boy is a gendered one, yet if you just call them, you'd also just call Rocker Boys that are Rocker Girl. So just calling them a Rocker as the gender neutral one is easier. But they basically are the charismatic, not exactly leader types, but rather they're the artistic, charismatic characters. AKA they play guitars and do that and whatnot, and influence crowds. An actual notable Rocker Boy is Johnny Silverhand, aka Keanu Reeves' character. Yes, I just like to do repetitiously, but yeah, he is a notable one. All roles also have what is known as a rule build. You can see one down at the bottom here. The Rocker Boy, or the Rockers, is the ability to influence a crowd. This is obviously very summarized, but they actually go over them later in a further section in far more detail. Because while they have that little short summary there, they give a upgraded summary and like unique abilities that each role ability has later on. After the Rocker is the Solo. They are the Mercenary, the gun-toting badasses. Literally, they are made to shoot efficiently and kill efficiently. Their special ability is literally being better at combat. This role is almost a mandatory for all edge runners. You can survive without them, but you have to compensate for the fact that you don't have a solo with something else. Following the Solo is the Netrunner. The Netrunners are the hackers. They are basically really just as it says. They hack. And their special ability is to hack. It's rather simple. You don't really need to elaborate. But Netrunners are actually the most improved class out of all the classes from 2020 to RED. Former Netrunners practically played a different game compared to everyone else because they actually basically did not need to even be in the same location as their fellow players, and they usually also acted in a special turn known as net turn, which is you could practically play through like 7 of those without ever without allowing your was known as meat turn allies take any turns, but also their enemies. There's also a chance you could kill practically a bunch of people via just using net running. But you can do that now also via the quick hacks, like in, I think you can. I may be wrong, but now instead of being in a rural location, you are basically required, because of an event in game, to be a local hacker. And the event in game is actually covered later, but it is essentially that. The internet as a whole basically blew up and had to be locked down because rogue AI and very dangerous programs roamed it and were attacking everything, meaning everyone had to cut themselves off. Following the Netrunner is the tech. The tech is essentially just the guy who basically fixes stuff and makes stuff. Often they may also be, if I understand correctly, they may also be able to control drones, but that may be just my memory from the 2020 version of techs. But they basically are the people who repair and make stuff and upgrade your equipment. They're not necessarily necessary, but they're useful. Oh, I didn't say what was necessary, but are useful. Rockers aren't necessary, but they can be useful. Netrunners are practically mandatory because they are on the same level as a solo, where you need them. Well, actually, no, even Netrunners are more mandatory as well. Solos can be replaced by people who have powerful guns. Netrunners are only Netrunner. Though, as I'll describe later, there's a way to get around that. Then after tech is the medtech. You may wonder, what's the difference? Medtech are basically just doctors. They're the healer, the mobile healer of this game. Their special ability is to just perform medicine on people, which ranges from first aid, well, enhanced first aid, to surgeries, I think. Because I think any character can actually do first aid, but medtechs are superior at it. Following medtechs are media. Media are essentially journalists, reporters. They literally are supposed to be the people who can get stuff out there. Information, news, all that stuff. And their ability is credibility, which is supposed to make them more lethal in situations. So if you're trying to get out a big scoop of, hey, Evil Corporation 32 is doing evil, and you'll believe me because I have credibility. But yeah, that is the media. A lot of these are very simple in their descriptions because practically their name describes a lot of what they are. Following that is the exec. Execs are you're basically a person who operates within the corporate structure. This literally means that you are the corporate scum in the game, though you are the corporate scum working for the Edge Runners. You may be the one bankrolling the entire operation, or you may be just an Edge Runner trying to blow off steam from you having to work a 9 to 9 job in the corporate world. And by 9 to 9, I do mean 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And their special ability is teamwork, which is twofold. It makes it so that your team members work better, but it also means that you are, in fact, have some lackeys, which you can use to do stuff for you. And these lackeys are NPCs. Following this deck is the lawman. The lawman can be anything from a security guard to a little police officer. And I know what some people may be thinking. Why would you play a police officer in a game all about practically being a bunch of criminals? Because, as we all know, police aren't exactly the most squeaky clean individuals, even nowadays. Meaning, in a dark cyberpunk future, they are even less squeaky clean. They are practically owned by the corporation. They are corporate lapdogs. Some might think that they're that now, but at least they aren't basically paid for by the corporation. Their special ability is backup, which is literally they can call in back up from their job to help them. It's a little weird. Following the lawman is the fixer. Fixers are a rather weird role that you can play. But the only reason I actually hold that opinion is because the fixer is often the one who is the middleman to get you the job. So you can literally play as that character in your group. You can be the employer, but not really. You're more like not you're the employer employed by someone else. Commonly corporates. But sometimes these small jobs like rescue this girl from this booster gang. And their special ability is known as Operator. It basically is they have connections and they can use them. Along that is the Nomad. The Nomad is the least descriptive out of them all, but they are essentially wanderers who are masters of vehicles, and even their ability, called Moto, is literally the ability to drive and even get free cars. But yeah. Then, following that is not what the image I have right here, but it is rather, following that is the listing of the 3 character creation method: Street Rats, Edge Runners, and Complete Package. Street Rats uses templates and pre-generated statistic or stats to help you speed into the game. You want to play the stereotypical solo? Choose a Street Rat. Edge Runners are still not the complete character creation package, but rather they are the quick and easy yet not as generic character creation system of the game, where you still practically don't make complete choices, but you still have very minor stuff like, oh, you roll all your stuff individually and whatnot. Then there is the complete package. This is the comprehensive character creation method where you choose everything yourself. You don't take pre-built stat, you don't roll for your stat, you get to purchase your own equipment, stuff like that. And that's basically those are the creation methods. Then following is Tales from the Street. The next section in the book, running the life path. The life path is actually basically this helpful character backstory creator. It is essentially just very much it helps you decide stuff like, is your character from America or are they not? It's very simple stuff, kind of like that, but it goes more in depth, obviously. It is like, hey, what's your family origin? This, that, blah, blah. They do say they prefer you to roll D10s or D6s, but they also just say that you could choose the options. And of course, most of the reason these are the option they want you to choose to use is actually so that you can get extras for when you play forward and create the rest of your character. They basically make you first choose your cultural origin, then go to a basic personality. Obviously, I think the personality might be one of the ones that is truly just a kind of helpful thing that you don't entirely need at all, and you could skip possibly if you've already got a personality in mind for your character. And then they go into a section that is basically what kind of style and what kind of style, both like personal and dress, does your character have? Then basically following that is the section where they start outlining your family life. Everything from what you what was your family like? What did they do? How were you raised? Do you have any family crises? Then they make you basically roll to see if you had friends or have friends, and if you have enemies, and even if you've had a love life. Then they proceed to what's known as the life goals, HK. Why is your character basically doing what they're doing? Because your character needs a reason for why they're edge runner, or basically edge runners and cyberpunks are the same thing. But why is your character doing what they do instead of just doing that 9 to 9 grind, getting by via legal methods? Then they also have a small section near the end that is actually basically a life path section for your role that you chose to play as a character. Okay, you're a rocker, there's a section for that. You're a netrunner, there's a section for that. You're a exec, there's a section for that. And obviously I'm not going to cover those in any more detail than I have anything else, because they're really complicated they're far more complicated compared to any of the tables before, but that's because they got to get specific because you are playing a specific role. And it basically kind of explains maybe why your character is in this or whatnot. And that's basically the end of that section. And we proceed to fitted for the future, the parts of a character. This section is essentially very much some of the actual game parts of a character, like stats, HP, humanity, skills, and equipment. Stats are essentially your attributes from Dungeons and Dragons. They are split into 4 groups: mental, combat, fortune, physical. They're right here. I know you may not be able to see that easily, but they are essentially, in the mental group is intelligence, willpower, goal, and empathy. Intelligence is a very basic, just, hey, I'm intelligent. Willpower is your ability to withstand stress and not crack. Though that may also, no, that wasn't that. Then there's cool, the ability to impress others, aka, hey, I'm wearing these shades, aren't I pretty cool? Then there's empathy. Empathy is your ability to care for others. And actually, it is one of the more important stats for other stuff, as it determines humanity, which is, if you played another game called Cthulhu, it is practically the same as that stat of sanity, but different. Because your character can just lose your humanity score, via witnessing bad acts or committing bad acts. But then there's also, you lose your humanity from getting cyberware, chroming up. Following the mental is the combat group, which only has technique and reflexes. Technique is your ability to manipulate tools or instruments, but not in the same way as reflexes. Reflexes easier response time and coordination though, such as aiming, throwing, juggling. Okay, this is the stat to hit stuff commonly when you are at range. Following that is the fortune group, which only contains the one stat of luck. Luck is your luck. It's how lucky you are. It is actually a minor point allocation that gives you the ability to spend it, to offset, to like boost your die rolls or penalize other people's maybe. I'd have to look into it further, but it's essentially a pool of points that refresh each session. Then following that one is a physical group, which contains the stats of body, dexterity, and movement. Body is your toughness, meaning how tough you are. It determines how much damage. It's one of the two stats that determines how much damage you take, are able to take, not just take. Then there's dexterity, your overall physical competence. Basically, it's the bouncing, leaping, jumping. It can even be used slightly in combat. Then there's movement, which is as simple as it sounds. It's how you move. There are 3 ways of determining your stats here. And obviously those 3 ways are Street Rat, Edge Runner, and Complete Package. Street Rats and Edge Runners both use tables to determine their stats, but they differ in one way. You roll once to determine all your stats for a Street Rat, but you roll for each individual stat to determine it for Edge Runner. But then the more complicated method is Complete Package, which is you get a set number of stat points to spend on your stuff. Then following that is the derived stat, aka HP and Humanity. HP is determined by a special formula that they don't even make you calculate. They give you a table to calculate it of body and will times something divided by something plus something. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I don't have to, because if I have a 5 will and a 5 body, I know where I have to go. I've got to cross-examine the table to see where those 2 numbers intersect. And I don't even have to do the calculation, because they knew RPG players aren't necessarily the best at math. And if you resent that, I resemble it. And then Humanity is essentially just it's determined just by your empathy. Humanity is empathy times 10. A Humanity, it basically determines how many cyber synapses your character can have before they go into a state known as cyberpsychosis that I will explain later. Next after that is the skill section. They're split into several categories. These categories being awareness skills, the skills that help you notice the environment, body skills, those that involve physical tasks, feats of strength, endurance, and other physical attributes. Control skills, often these are the ones that allow you to control vehicles or ride animals. Education, they're as simple as their name implies. They are to determine how much knowledge and training you have from formal education and or training. Fighting skills, those are the skills that you use to fight, ranging from melee weapons to hand-to-hand combat. Then there's performance. Basically, acting, musician, special effects, makeup, all that kind of stuff. It's the performance arts as a skill category. Then range weapons. The ability to use range weapons such as guns and bows. And of course, rocket launchers. Then there's the social skills. As simple as it sounds. Your ability to be social. Or not so social. Then the final category is technique skills. Basically, they're the technical skills that your character might have. They obviously have methods to create this. There's street rats that just give you your skills outright. They just say, here's your skills. You don't need to even think about them. Then there's the edge runners, which is, here's a allotment of skill points. spend them in these because you chose this role. Then there's just the complete package, which is just, here's the skill points, go buck wild on your character. If you build an unbalanced character that can't do what they're supposed to do in game, that's your fault. We don't take credit for this. Then following that is weapons and armor and light items and housing. Obviously, they give examples of those weapons, but they give more in-depth examples later on in another section. But there's 2 methods, unlike the 3 before, but they're still based on the 3 character creation methods. But it's street rats and edge runners take pre-built loadouts, while complete packages just buy their own from an allotted amount of money. This also covers housing and cyberware in here in light detail. And that's basically that section. We then move on to putting the cyber into the punk. This section is all about cyberware and how it's treated in universe. And then they talk about something that I'm going to have to give a slight disclaimer when I get to it. Cyber psychosis. But yeah, they talk about how it's all treated in the universe, how cyberware has slightly become a fashion statement, but it's still utility. And then closer to then following the fashion statement, then they get into cyber psychosis. Cyber psychosis is where you have witnessed traumatic events, not just tragic, and have too much cybernetics. This symptom, this thing called cyber psychosis, makes your character disassociate from reality itself and often because of your combination of your cybernetics, and since most people who approach cyber psychosis are already violent individuals, they start to do violent outbursts because certain inhibitors, like the ability to tell that someone's life has value, is gotten rid of by you diving into this disassociated state. Now, huge disclaimer, cyberpsychosis does not represent any medical condition in real life. You should never use cyberpsychosis or its portrayals in media as an actual barometer for people who might have disorders that make them disassociate. And obviously, people who have those, aka those who common disorders that do this, like PTSD and DID, aka post-traumatic stress disorder and dissociative identity disorder, are not naturally violent because of their disorders. They are just people who develop something because of events in their life. This book does not represent reality if it is not obvious already by the fact that you're playing in a cyberpunk future that was never realized, even though the previous edition's year has already come and gone. But with that disclaimer out of the way, let's actually move forward into the actual cybernetics and some of the rules for that. Obviously, they actually touch on these rules better in later sections, but one of the major rules is that if it is a medically necessary procedure, you do not lose humanity. aka, you lost your hand, you replace your hand. But if you got some high-tech, like Uber puncher hand, that is not a medically necessary replacement. So you basically you lose humanity for that. is also another thing that does not lose humanity for. I consider this a little progressive. In spite of the setting, they do not make you lose humanity for going through gender-affirming surgeries. Even though it uses an actual thing from the game that does make you normally lose humanity for using it, known as body sculpting. But the version that makes you lose humanity via the body sculpting is the version that actually raises one of the stats in game. And back slightly, going back towards cyberpsychosis, it actually does explain cyberpsychosis is not just your character starts being more violent and okay, you can be more violent. It is actually commonly cyberpsychos, which is the term for those suffering from cyberpsychosis, even though that's not really a term, it's the in-universe slang term, are often taken down by what are known as Psycho Squad. Or if you watched or played any of the recent Cyberpunk stuff, you know those as max tech. They are made to take down high-powered individuals that are out of the common ability of normal police officers to take down. They then talk about all the cyberware in game, or really just the category, which is fashion wear, aka the stuff that is practically not really cyberware, like biomonitors, and I can't really remember that much else, but there's not very much that in there that requires you to lose humanity, because it really is just, these are stuff that practically everyone has, and they're almost akin to wearing witch watches and stuff like that. Then there's neuralware, stuff to do with your brain. Then there's cyber optics, eye enhancement, cyber audio, ear enhancement, internal body cyberware. Basically, you want to replace your lungs? You replace your lungs. You want to replace your liver so you can drink yourself all night long? You replace your liver. It's external. Most of this is you're making it so that you look more buff, you're providing yourself with built-in body armor, stuff like that. Then there's cyberlimbs. Cyberlimbs are very simply the cyberlimbs. They're as simple as their name. Then the final type is known as Borgware. These are often so extreme that they don't really even have an equivalent of something that we could build nowadays without it being almost basically artillery. Okay, one that actually exists is very simply, you want to have a bunch of cyber eyes? You get a Borgware plane. Basically, it is such extreme stuff that common people don't really have it. Obviously, they also do include ways of determining what cybernetics you get from character creation, which is split into two. It's the same as before. It's street rats and edge runners just get packages to choose from. And then there's a complete package, which is you get money to spend on equipment, and that equipment also includes cyberware. So don't go blowing all your money on your guns and your armor. You gotta spend some on your cyber. They do also include a way to make it so that, just in case for those of you doing the complete package, you run out of money and you want some other stuff, you can take a little DM handout that makes you indebted to an NPC character or group. Then very small section of after this section is explaining what your character sheet is and how it basically functions. The section following that is known as the Fall of the Towers. Now this is actually a rather interesting section, because it is essentially, you get to see this TTRPG's depiction of events from a greater perspective of the scene in Cyberpunk 2077 where Johnny takes down Arasaka Tower. And that's really all it is, actually. It's just a story, it's another story in the thing. And thus, the next section is simply called Getting It Done. The basics of resolution. This is all about resolving actions. Basically, by resolving actions, I truly just mean resolving action. This section deals with stuff like explaining movement, initiative, actions you can do, how to resolve skill rules, stuff like that, and it explains how all the skills work in greater depth than they already did. And then they explain the role ability in greater detail and their benefits per rank. I'm obviously not going to explain all these, otherwise I partially giving away part of the game for free. And I'm already might be pushing it with how much I'm showing of certain parts. But they explain it, and they even talk about how you are actually able to do what is essentially multi-classing or multi-rolling in this game. Through playing the game, you can essentially become a solo that can net run, or you can be a exec with some media credibility. But yeah, that's essentially that part section. There isn't. I am slightly summarizing these parts quickly, but that is rather because I'm not going to explain things in detail. Some of the standard ways to resolve skills in this is setting difficulty values, aka what you have to meet or exceed. It is essentially like in Dungeons & Dragons, a difficulty class, aka you need to roll, let's say, a 12 on a athletics check to jump over a wall. But on this, it might actually just be like a 7 to jump over a wall. That is basically what that section is about. The next section, that is known as Friday Night Firefight, is the section that explains how combat works in greater detail and explains what kind of actions you can do in on your turns and what you do for each type of certain attack. aka you're using a ranged weapon, here's how you resolve those. Using melee weapon, here's how you resolve those. You want to go fisticuffs, here's the actual martial arts rules for combat. Then they talk about the resolving of the damage, aka applying your armor, then dealing yourself the damage. And final part of this is reputation. Reputation is a stat that can both help and hinder you, because it can, when you're an unknown, you might not get the best jobs, but also nobody will be targeting you saying, oh, these are the guys that pulled off that one thing that affected my group poorly. So yeah, a high may get you good jobs, high reputation may get you good jobs, but a high reputation may also put a target on your head for the people that you wronged. But yeah, that's that section. Then we proceed to net running. Net running was highly reworked between editions. This time, it is essentially you build a small before you built a self-contained little dungeon thing where you dungeon crawl through as just the net runner. But in this, you build what are known as net architectures, which can be as simple as you've got to hack through these series of firewalls, or you have to hack through these series of firewalls that then have off branches that then you hack through. it's far simpler because it's more just like it's a flow chart compared to the infinite expansion that a normal that the net dungeons in 2020 could be. They even explain how these things happen, and also they explain a bit of what happened to the net, aka that whole the internet had to be cordoned off because of a bunch of feral AI that wanted to basically kill people who went into it, and what are known as daemon programs running wild with them. And near the end, they actually give you, the game master, a method of how to basically build the net architecture and explain that in detail. And that's that section, because going more in depth, I need examples. I'm not going to use those. Next is the trauma team. This section talks about damage and how to recover from that, and also talks about hospital visits and receiving surgery, all from injury treatment to cybernetic implant. They then give you examples of drugs in the universe and their effects, and go on to give you a way to recover some humanity, to stop yourself from going into cyberpsychosis. And even in this section, they go into greater detail of cyberpsychosis and its effects, and even include here a disclaimer themselves, or rather an explanation on what disassociation is, and that even though cyberpsychosis is a dissociation that makes you violent, that is because of a combination of factors, that you start to see yourself as a bunch of replaceable parts, and you start applying that to others and realizing that you're all just nothing, and decide to kind of disregard human life. That's very much how they kind of explain what cyberpsychosis is. But yeah, and then they go on to the next section called Welcome to the Dark Future. This is one of the sections I will talk about the least, because this is essentially just, hey, here's the story and timeline of Cyberpunk, explaining everything from when certain things were invented, when certain events happened, the netball, the explosion of the towers, and the destruction, and the event that actually gives Cyberpunk RED its name, the Fourth Corporate War, that actually, in certain locations, makes the skies red from the destruction that happened. Thus, it is called Cyberpunk RED. They also explain in the following section, which is known as the Time of Red, why it's red, aka they give you an actual example here. The skies are red, so they call it red time. It's the aftermath of the Fourth Corporate War. This corporate war was mainly fought between two major companies, Arasaka Industries and Militech. The aftermath of this was twofold. Arasaka was practically kicked out of America for causing this, and Militech was taken control of by the US. At least that is my cursory knowledge of what happened because of the Fourth Corporate War. And they actually also explain kinds of the stuff that has happened in this default setting. You can obviously move it around, make it earlier, make it later. Obviously, I wouldn't make it earlier, I would only make it later, because I'd probably just play most of my Red games in the 2077 setting, since at least people would know the city from possibly playing the game. Then the following section is known as Welcome to Night City, a city of dreams. They talk about what is basically the default location of the Cyberpunk universe, which is Night City, which is sort of an LA stand-in, but also I think it's located elsewhere than LA. I think LA may be a nuclear wasteland, but that may just be my thinking. Night City is the same city from Edge Runners and 2077 because it's very much the default setting. They talk about all the aspects of the city, including how it changed from the 2020 version and how it is in the aftermath of the Fourth Corporate War, which includes what essentially is the entire city got leveled at some point, practically, and they had to rebuild it. They also include the movers and shakers of Night City, aka, hey, these are the important characters that you can use in your game, so use them. And following that section is everyday life in the time of Red. This explains common stuff like laws, how you do stuff, where you get your food probably, stuff like that. It is a rather just like quality of possibly roleplay section that you basically just kind of have. And that section I'm not going to go that in depth of, but the section following is the new economy, the new street economy. This is essentially the section has items, services, cyberware, all that stuff in greater detail than it had before. Obviously, it includes stuff that was featured earlier in character creation, but it's got like weapons, cyberware. It even talked greater about the vehicle and what your living expenses might be, how your character handles housing. It even has template vehicles and that. And then near the end, they started explaining how your character would earn money from running your jobs, aka, hey, you need to rescue someone, or hey, you need to perform a wicked heist, to your minor gigs like your shows for rockers and being a police officer, or working a simple merc job as solo. And that's practically what is kind of the end of the player section of the game, which is then followed by running Cyberpunk. And it's basically like, here's how you actually, as a game master, run the game. It explains how to actually run the setting. Okay, you wanna have the feelings of like Blade Runner, the game, the anime. You want all that stuff as an example of what you can actually like. You want to make it feel like that. You want to make it feel punky and all that. And it even explains how to like actually do what are known as jobs or adventures, and how you kind of set those up. And even basically has a section explaining how you build those, and actually uses the beginning of the game, aka the section of Never Fade Away. But again, in the beginning, the Never Fade Away section as an example of here's the story, here's how you kind of set up it. But it's also basically said, this is a plotted line that you should be willing to deviate from to some capacity. And basically kind of the final part of the section is character progression and giving you some basic NPCs to use in the game. And that's what is the kind of final portion, except for Black Dog. Black Dog is actually basically a kind of mini sample adventure at the back that you could run with little alteration beyond making it fit your characters better. And that is Cyberpunk RED. In conclusion, I do think Cyberpunk RED is a wicked game that I think most people should try. Obviously, it is a great continuation of Cyberpunk 2020, and it's a great prequel, in my opinion, to 2077. I do hope that someday, if I actually get to run live games on stream, that this will be one of them. I do very much think if you like Cyberpunk or just futuristic dark setting, you might want to get into this if you enjoy TTRPGs. It is heavily improved compared to 2020 if you've played 2020. There are some aspects that may make me go back to 2020 but take some parts of this. But a lot of those aspects can be fixed with time. Because some of the aspects that I like from 2020 is the greater plethora of content. But that is also because that game, 2020 was released in the 90s. RED was released in 2020. One of the major improvements over 2020 is this net running mechanic. Because the old net running mechanics were sometimes so tedious that some people just pulled out a game known as Netrunner to resolve net running attempts. Netrunner is actually a card game that has two versions. One released by the same people who made Magic the Gathering, aka Wizards of the Coast, but then the later version is created by Fantasy Flight from a lease from Wizards of the Coast because they still own it. And just to closing out, kind of a little even conclusion summary. I think if you enjoyed watching Edge Runners and playing Cyberpunk, maybe play Cyberpunk RED. But if you're craving for more Cyberpunk stuff after watching Cyberpunk Edge Runners and playing 77, maybe play some other ones like Deus Ex or maybe even Shadowrun, which is actually another TTRPG that I may review someday. Now, if you enjoyed that review, make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you want to watch another video, that's one in that card. And if you'd be so kind to help my channel, like and share with your friends. I hope you've had a great day and will have an even better day after this. Bye-bye.